My first friendship breakup in my teenage years. You'd be scared to make new friends. Hello lovely people, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Canisha and I create video content on queer, lifestyle, just documenting my 20s and experiences. So if you want to join me on my journey, go ahead and subscribe button below. Today's video is a very exciting one. It's not just me. I'm joined by
Mayfair Got a YouTube channel as well with my husband Winston. I'm a mother, a new mother, life coach.
That's a good summary. I was like, it was a way you see. You're an author too, podcaster, because my son just comes out, you know. She is multifaceted and a big inspiration to me. Today's video is all about friendship, how they evolve, what we've kind of been doing to make sure we evolve with the friendship at the same time. And yeah, just basically talking all things friendship. One of the reasons why I kind of like thought about this video was like, sometimes there's really not a blueprint on friendship or like how to navigate it, especially when you're going from like being a teenager to being an adult. Yes, now you're married, you're a mother, you know, all these different stages of adulthood. Friendships evolve with that as well. I figured we might as well share just a bit about our own journeys, what we've just been doing, and then sort of take it from there. So, although we met on a youth program, we actually only spent a day together. And we were both working, so I don't know what time we had to be making friendships, but it just so happened. And also, that's actually another thing that I want to say is like, in your 20s, do you not find it sometimes hard to know how do you meet?
It's so true. Actually meeting new people requires a lot more intentionality. That's probably the thing that I would say anyway, like with adult friendships, but yeah, especially with meeting people. And finding things in common. Like I remember the reason we stayed in touch initially was because you were doing poetry, so you're doing a lot of spoken word, and you had did you have a blog or somewhere that you were sharing? I had a blog, and I remember you had a blog as well.
We're like, we have to stay in touch, and then after that followed each other on social media, and then you know what they say, the rest was history. We're still here. So that's kind of like our journey to it. How has our friendship transitioned to be like, no, I actually want to have you as part of my day-to-day, everything that's happening in my life, not just like a you know, someone I know online.
I think I remember, and this was like maybe a bit later on when we were both in kind of like a gap year. Well, you were kind of like doing a work experience, but like your own business. And I think one thing that we did was just like knowing what's actually going on in each other's lives. So I remember at that time we had like basically like weekly accountability calls, and that really helped because I think with friendships you can find that it's so easy to grow apart because you meet up and you don't even know what to speak about because you're not really looped into what's going on with that person's life. So even though like the reason that we did that was like accountability, but it meant like, oh okay, like I actually know like what are the highs that are going on for you right now, like what are the lows, and it kind of keeps you connected. Whereas I think that's what can be a struggle sometimes, like especially as you become an adult, it's like you don't get to meet up with people like as often, and it's like, oh wait, like you meet up and it's like, wait, what's going on with them? Like,
especially if you meet for 2 hours, you spend the first hour saying, so this is my life for the last 3 months.
Exactly. Like a catch up.
I think you've made such a good point about finding something in common that you both have, because I feel like that becomes such like an anchor or like a guiding compass as to like, oh okay, cool, we know we'll come back talking about business, but at the same time there is so much more going on. Our timeline, one thing that was interesting as well is like the pandemic, where you can't see each other as much as you'd want to. We now transition to talking online and just FaceTiming and stuff like that. How are we able to make time for each other? I think that's always like an interesting thing. It's like with priorities, like how do we make sure to show up for friendships like that?
Well, one thing that I will say that you do really well is, I don't even know if it's like not taking it personal, but you're just like very good at like, oh okay cool, if text isn't working, and I'm always like very conscious of this, like because I'm not best texter at times. We'll try FaceTime and then a call, like maybe FaceTime's not the best time, would be okay cool, let's drop a text. Okay, if that's not working, like let's respond to each other's like DMs or whatever. So it's just making an effort like to connect like in different ways. And I think especially like with the pandemic, well life in general, you can be at different stages like with different things going on, but I think one thing that I appreciate about you is like there never feels like there's any obligation like or guilt like or anything.
I feel like it kind of leads as well to like expectations and sort of setting expectations for each other, but also understanding where each other's coming from. Like I think firstly I want to say thank you for that compliment. But one thing that's come from that is like managing expectations. Like for me personally, I recognise that you know what, we've all got busy lives, you've got a busy life. I can't expect you to be able to show up the same exact way that we were able to show up for each other when we were doing our year in industry, where it was just each other as like looking out for each other and smaller responsibilities. So it's like managing your own expectations, but like, do you know what, I understand that person is going through different things, or at least I know that they'll show up in a different way from before, but it's an evolution rather than like maybe Mayfair doesn't want to speak to me anymore. Like, what's going on there?
What would you say like helps you with that? Because I think that's like probably a challenge for like a lot of people, like not taking things personal, not assuming. Like, what helps you with that within your friendships?
To be honest, if I think of our friendship, we've just been really good at just talking in a very intentional way, if that makes sense. Like, we're very, what I've learned so much from you on how to communicate in a relationship and how actually check and be like, Mayfair's good at the how are you, but how are you?
How are you really?
How are you really? And that's sort of that tone of being like, no, let's go deeper, let's find out what's going on, has helped me to figure out those expectations taken from our relationship, applied it to my other relationships, where I just go that bit deeper, and then that's how I can sort of communicate my expectations, but also have the space for them to communicate their expectations. Because I feel like sometimes it might be harder in other friendships where I haven't had that frank conversation where it's like, hey, you know what? I didn't like that you didn't show up for me that time. I thought you'd be there for me. Like, if you don't have a space to be able to do that, you also don't have a space to say, hey, like, expectations, like, here's how it actually is.
That's so true. And I think it's useful, especially now, because like kind of live in almost like a cut-off culture, and I think absolutely there are times like where it's important to have your boundaries, where it's like, okay, cool, like that was crossed, and I don't know if we can come back from that, but sometimes like just having like honest conversations about, hey, like we're at different stages right now, like it'd be really good to, I don't even know if you remember this, but there was a conversation we had over the phone. It was like height of the pandemic. I want to say it was like, must have been like early 2021 or something, and we just had like a very honest conversation around like our actual friendships, because I feel like sometimes like you just don't do that, like around like any way that you feel like I'm supporting you well, anything that you want like more of, and it was just very honest, and I don't think we do that like a lot like in our friendships. So
it comes to another thing that I sometimes realise with the cut off, but also with those kind of conversations, we tend to reserve them for romantic partnerships and not our friendships. Like, if some of the behaviours we're doing in our friendships, if your partner was doing it, you would stop them and call them out, and you say, we need to talk about this, or I'm really keen for this relationship to go further, let's work on it, let's see how we can support each other. Those check-ins that you said, you
actually talk about the relationship, like not just like the day-to-day. It's like, hey, like how do you feel like we're doing? And it's so true, like we don't do that in friendships. Like, how is a friendship going? Like, are we supporting each other well? Like, is there something different that you need? So it's true.
And maybe sometimes the lack of that means that we give people one chance. You mess up, that is that cut off thing. Whereas in a relationship, if you were knowing, oh, you know what, we've had these kind of conversations, I'm willing to talk about it and hurt each other's feelings in the sense of like to understand, then you'd give them 5 chances. Because you're like, no, I'm keen to make this work, I'm keen to make this friendship be a long-term one.
Progressive.
And what would you say is a lesson that you've learned from our friendship or friendship in general that sort of helped shape your perspective, or how you go into maybe the other relationships in your life, or just in general? Like, are there any lessons that sort of stand out?
I would say one just like comes back to intentionality for me. I think that's like the big word like that I'm learning, especially in this season, to make any kind of like friendship or relationship work. But really like expressing how you feel to the person, especially gratitude, is something that I've realized like makes such a big difference. Like, it could be like a little thing, like I think like when you actually just like, because I think we don't do it enough. Like we have the thoughts, but it's like affirming. So for example, I think we were like kind of like trying to text and like arrange a date like to meet up, and you actually just messaged me and said, hey, like does this date work? And it seemed like a little thing, but to me it was like, oh, like I appreciated that so much, because now I could just look at my calendar quickly and be like, oh there's like nothing like there, and like as a mum, like there's so much that goes on, so I appreciated that. So I think just intentionality, like expressing like when someone does something that you genuinely appreciate, I don't think we do that enough, and I think it allows that person to be seen in what they're doing, and they realize like, oh, actually that's something that they appreciated, rather than just like sometimes you don't really think like it's something that actually helps progress the relationship. And I think taking that into my friendships, my relationships, like expressing gratitude has really helped.
Honestly, you're so good at that, because even when you message me to say thank you so much for doing that, one thing about being gratitude from the receiving end. I feel encouraged to do that more often. So I'm like, okay, cool. I know Mayfair likes it when that's suggested just to make it easier to arrange. So I'm like, okay, go forward. Here's 3 dates. Pick one of them, okay? There's no arm in and arm. We meet up, but here's an option of 3 dates, and then we take it from there. And so it's like, oh, okay, cool. I know that this is received well, and therefore I'll continue to do that because I'm like, do you know what? It works, and it makes it easier for us to be able to meet up and to connect again. Which is also good.
How about you? Like, what have you learned in your friendships, especially post uni, like now working and like having all your friends like kind of in different places? Yeah,
you touched on about intentionality. When you're all living in such different places and now work schedules, you have to plan. Like one of the things that I do with my friends is that I'm like, okay, life is happening for all of us. Like we're working now, so how can I make it work? So for me, making it work is, a lot of my friends live in London, so I'm like, I know I'm going to be in London at least once a week to go to work, so I'll make sure that I stay longer in London. Okay, like after work, we'll go for drinks, after work, we'll go for food, whatever that is, to make it work within our schedules and what it allows. But also the second thing that I, especially coming from uni up until now, I think it's the mentality of knowing that it's the first for us, like kind of having that knowledge of saying like, this is the first time we're all navigating so many new things in our lives, right? The first time we're having friendships at this stage of our lives. So I can't expect the other person to get it right all the time. And I also can't expect myself to get it right. Like friendship guilt, it's a real thing.
It's
like
real. Oh my gosh.
You'll be crippled by it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this person thinks I'm a terrible friend. They don't want to be friends
and
anymore.
it causes more distance because it's
now
like,
you're scared to reach out.
And so it's like, now if I reach out,
you're like, damn, why is she replying to me?
And the person's probably thinking the same thing.
And it's just
so true.
You just continue to furtherize because somebody doesn't want to reach out because they feel bad that they've not reached out. And so that first mentality was like, do you know what? We will stumble here and there, and we won't get it right. Most of the time we won't get it right.
Yeah, you won't. And I think that's really good advice on like how to, because that was going to be my question, but you kind of answered it. How do you overcome that friendship guilt of like, I haven't done this, or like this happened in this person's life and I wasn't as there for them as I could have been. But I think you said like grace goes a long way, like realizing that you're both navigating that life stage like for the first time.
And also I feel like actually being transparent about how you're feeling helps so much, because you'd be surprised, like we said earlier, you're both feeling it. So if I'm telling you, oh gosh, I felt so bad I've not been able to pick up your phone, you're like, I'm so bad, I just tried to call you and it's fine.
So when someone texts like, oh, I feel so bad, I haven't reached out in a long time, and you're there like, I feel bad. Like,
so when you share that, that's how I'm feeling. The other person's like, I'm feeling the same thing. Or it's the opposite way. If they're not feeling that, they're at least like, oh, I get it. Like you have remorse.
Exactly.
I think it's worse when you have no remorse. Like laissez-faire is what it is. But if they're like, no, I actually feel bad about this, I'm so sorry. You're like, no, I appreciate you acknowledging that. Going forward, maybe let's try to do voice notes so we still feel like we're speaking to each other, but there's no pressure to reply there and then, or you're open to being able to experiment and do things a little bit differently. How do you maintain so many relationships at the same time?
It's definitely something like I'm still working out, like especially in this new season, like as a mother, I feel like I'm figuring out where like a lot of my relationships like kind of like fit in. But I think one thing is like just kind of like taking a look at my life and like the things that I'm doing, and then seeing based off of that like what are points of connection that I can have like with people. So for example, I haven't been doing like a lot of business stuff, so that's maybe like created less opportunities to connect with some of the friends that I made as I was on that journey. But now I'm starting my podcast, it's kind of like sparked in me like, oh, let me reach out to that person and see like how it's going with that venture that they're doing, and see how we can connect over that. Or if I have like a friend who is also a new mother, like just different things, like as life is going on for me, like using that as an opportunity to spark that like, oh wait, like this must be going on for this person as well, and like checking in. So, but just like like looking at what's going on with my life, and then realizing like what about, because the reason we form friendships is because of that connection, right? And of course like sometimes those things change, like I don't have a blog anymore, you don't have a blog anymore, but there's still like there's ways that you can like thread in your lives together and then see what you can do about that.
At the end of the day, that's why friendship is so beautiful, is that we're building connections, but it's a support system. Whether it's emotional support, whether it's through like opportunities, whatever it is, there's different ways that we're able to support each other. And I think that thing of like, now you know you're stepping back into the business world, those friendships are still there because you've not fallen out with any of those people.
Exactly.
But now there's a more like a burst of new life about what you talk about, but also an excitement, I guess, to be like, I can't wait to reconnect with this person because it's been, you know, so long, and I know so many cool things have been happening and just so many developments. And I guess as well, one thing that I've learned when it was friendship especially is that it's okay. Like, I have got a friend of mine who we were super close as teenagers, and then we stopped talking for like a few years. We weren't as close, but now we're actually making an intentional step to say like, no, I want to meet up with you and let's build a new, like, an evolved relationship. And there's an excitement about coming back to each other. That's like, firstly, I know all vibe.
Exactly, because that's there.
But also, who are you now?
Relearning each other. That's a really good point.
And I think being open to that as well is a new thing, because I think sometimes with friendships there can be an unspoken breakup or like a proper breakup. Like, have you had a friendship breakup?
They're tough. And you don't expect it, but I've had one recently. It's really, really hard.
And I feel like sometimes it matches like a romantic breakup. Like, it's the same pain, same
like, you're
grief.
picturing, like, it's crazy, like the person going from being that person that was there with you, like, through like lows that you remember vividly and highs that you remember vividly, to like, oh wow, like, that person's not gonna. And you talk about, it's the same like with the breakup, that you talk about all the tomorrows and we're gonna do this. And with friendships, you imagine that like, oh, this is gonna be my bridesmaid and they're gonna be this and they're gonna be that, and it's like, oh wait, like,
you're grieving that.
Like it's not there.
And also that not being able to like text them the funny meme.
That's
why I keep that meme to myself. I gotta keep by myself. Shame.
And I think one thing that I have learnt though, like with friendship breakups, is like definitely there needs to be grace, but also I guess it's realizing like that feeling, like that like feeling that you have like after a friendship breakup. It's not necessarily evidence that like you've made the wrong decision, like whether it was like mutual, whether it was like, okay, cool, like this isn't working for both of us. So it's, and I had to remind myself of that, because I had a friendship breakup and it was different things, but afterwards I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel bad, and it's like, oh, did I make the right decision? But sometimes it's like not necessarily, it's just like the natural thing, like when you I guess like separate.
No, that's a good point, because sometimes it's that uncomfortable feeling that happens after that makes you go back to maybe what was not a healthy relationship, because of that familiarity and that it was making sense.
Exactly.
No, I completely get that. I remember my first friendship breakup in my teenage years. You'd be scared to make new friends.
Literally, and then it's when you have mutual friends and you're like, oh, where do I stand like with those people now? It can be harder in your 20s to make friends. So I think it is that asking yourself like, what's the little further step that I can take, like to see where this friendship can go, like if you connect with someone.
For someone who wants to either make new friendships or develop their friendships to be even deeper, what would you give them as tips to do so?
I touched on it before, but in terms of making your friendships deeper that you do already have, is like that gratitude piece. Like, actually challenge yourself, like to ask, if it's like an old friend you haven't connected with in a while, or someone that you speak to often, like actually just take the time to reflect, like what is it I like truly appreciate about that person for yourself. I think it just kind of adds like almost like a new, it refreshes your friendships, especially when you communicate that. And then I think with making new friends, this is something that I kind of struggled with, like I guess becoming a mother, because even during like pregnancy, like I don't know, like a lot of like my friends like haven't like had children yet, and it was tough, especially in the first trimester, because I wasn't like showing, but it was like I was like, oh, like does anyone like get this? Like, I want to throw up like at every point, and then like I want to like cry, whatever. And I joined this app called Peanut, which is basically like other like mothers, like and expecting mothers. So taking the time like to see and I connect with like who's at the same life stage. I don't think there's like, me and Canisha, like we connect really well and we're really good friends. So it's not just that because you're at the same life stage as someone, you're automatically gonna connect, but it can be a good way to do that. So yeah, like seeing how you can connect with someone based off of like life stages, and just being a bit creative about how you can do that, whether that's like Instagram or different sort of apps like that. It's what, like going to events as well, that's where I met like my husband. We were friends like first, like just truly like exploring like what am I passionate about like in this season, that leads you on people who are on the same path as well. Like, you know, if you newly started, like I don't know, like podcasting, and you'll think about doing pottery, like make an effort like to actually go out in that, and then you can actually meet people like based off of that.
My 2 or 3 things would be, for meeting new people, sometimes it's opening yourself up to someone else.
Yeah.
So for example, I think many people have like people we interact with at work or just in life in general, where you kind of, you know, if I go to you like, hey, how are you? Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah,
and then you leave, you don't add any more information sometimes like that, where I find that some of my friendships have started from a level of vulnerability where I'm like, if we've just met and I'm, you know, open enough, you'd be asking like, how are you? I'm like, I'm okay, but you know what, this last week has been a bit tough because maybe X, Y, Z's going on, or the opposite was like, I'm doing great, I'm actually going to be moving, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and they're like, wow, I also recently moved, and you snowball to get to know each other. But sometimes I feel like unintentionally we close ourselves from building new relationships because we finish the conversation too soon. We stop at the how are you and say I'm good, and we don't try to find another thing to connect with each other. So
true.
Either be vulnerable when someone asks you like how are you, or just be willing to just try to find a way to connect the two of you.
That's a really, really good point.
To be intentional. And I think my second thing for developing like a deeper friendship, I probably would encourage people to give grace to your friends already, and sort of recognize that your friendship will go through a period where maybe I'm the one that's calling Mayfair all the time, checking in, seeing how things going, but then there'll be another season where it's vice versa, or another season where it's balanced. So I wouldn't lose hope at the first season where it's like, I feel like I'm doing a lot of the heavy lifting, because it's like with, you know, romantic relationships, you're not always
sometimes
equally.
It's 20/80, sometimes it's 50/50.
Exactly, because I feel like that's how we end up not being there for friends when they go through stuff, because they're like, oh, I don't want to be the one to have to do all the work.
That's so true.
Sometimes it's the season, you know.
Grace, I think that's so important, and I think it makes it easy to have grace, like when you apply what we were speaking about before, like transparency, like being open about like where are you, and like asking those like questions, because you understand more. Oh wait, like this person's got a lot going on emotionally, whatever. So now like, you understand. Okay, they're not reaching out or whatever, planning stuff because they don't want to. It could be because of whatever else. So.
Life be lifing.
Life be lifing.
Thank you so much for sticking out through to the end of this video. I hope we were able to share with you some things that you can take away and apply to your own friendships, but also I think, you know, we're in our early 20s. Our friendship, I'm sure, is going to have even more evolutions to come as we go through the next stages, but intentionality, I think, has just been the main theme at all of it, whether it's intentionally listening, intentionally reaching out, intentionally just making an effort and showing that gratitude to the people in your life can go such a long way. But also, don't be discouraged if some friendships end, because maybe it ends for that season and then you might reconnect in the future, or just it might be making space for new friendships to come that are the next level to what you need to do. But I hope this helped, and thanks so much for watching, and subscribe to the Clements as well if you haven't already.
And subscribe to Canisha's channel if you haven't already. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed,
thank you so much for being on my channel.